I never expected a set of house keys to make my knees go weak, but the moment my father pressed the cold metal into my palm, something inside me cracked open. For the first time in years, after all the late nights at the firm, the ramen dinners, the endless grind just to stay afloat, I finally felt seen. "This is yours, sweetheart," my dad said, voice thick with pride. "A fresh start." My mother was already wiping her eyes on the sleeve of her coat as she stood on the little porch of the colonial home in Lakeshore, Maine. The house was small but charming, with white shutters, a warm cedar door, and a porch swing that creaked softly in the breeze. The kind of house that looked like it belonged in a holiday movie, not in the life of a woman who had spent the last decade drowning in spreadsheets. I'm Avery Langston, 33 years old, financial portfolio manager in Boston, and until that afternoon, I had been living in a shoebox apartment in Somerville that smelled permanently of my neighbor's burnt popcorn. I had worked so hard for so long that I'd forgotten what real gratitude felt like. But when my parents handed me that key, my key, I broke into a trembling laugh that spilled into a sob. "Mom, Dad, I don't deserve this," I whispered. My mother cupped my face. "You earned every inch of this place, Avery. We just wanted you to have somewhere that finally gives back to you." Behind me, Mason, my fiancé, stood with his hands in his pockets, smiling in a quiet, detached way that didn't match the surge of emotion boiling in my chest. He kissed my cheek lightly. "It's amazing, Ave," he murmured. "Really great." But his tone was off, polite, measured, like he was admiring a house on Zillow, not celebrating the home his future wife just received. I brushed it aside, telling myself he just wasn't good with big emotional moments. Then came the shift, the first crack in the ground beneath my feet. Mason's mother, Eleanor Hale, stepped forward, her eyes not on the porch or the garden or even her son. They were locked on the folder of documents in my father's hand. She had a smile plastered on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were scanning every page like a hawk sighting movement in the grass. "So," she said sweetly, "whose name is on the deed?" My dad answered casually, "For legal purposes, everything is in Avery's name. Cleaner that way. Saves them a headache after the wedding." For a split second, half a breath, Eleanor's expression dropped. Confusion, disapproval, calculation. Then she smoothed it over with a tight smile, so quickly that anyone else might have missed it. "How sensible," she said, though it sounded more like, "how inconvenient." Something cold slid down my spine. We stepped inside the house for the first time, and while my parents wandered through the living room, imagining holiday dinners and future grandchildren, I caught Eleanor standing alone in the kitchen, her fingers grazing the marble countertop, her gaze sharp and appraising. "This will be wonderful for the family," she said softly. I frowned. "Family?" "Oh yes," she replied, turning toward me with that same taut smile. "A home like this isn't just for two people. It's a foundation, a legacy." Her words should have felt warm, comforting. But something about the way she said legacy made my stomach knot. When Mason joined her, she leaned in close, too close, and whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded. Not hesitantly, not reluctantly, but knowingly. As if this conversation wasn't new. As if plans had already been made. I tried to shake it off, refusing to let anything taint what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. But when I caught Eleanor glancing again at the deed in my father's hand, something inside me whispered a warning I wouldn't understand until it was far too late. That afternoon was supposed to be the beginning of my new life. I didn't know yet it was the beginning of a war. 1 week after my parents handed me the keys, I was on the living room floor, surrounded by paint swatches, trying to decide between morning fog and silver mist. It was the kind of problem I used to dream of having, choosing colors for a home that was finally mine. Then I heard the rumble. A massive moving truck turned onto my street and stopped right in front of my house. At first, I thought they had the wrong address. But when the passenger door opened and Eleanor stepped out, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, lips pursed in satisfaction, my entire body went cold. Richard climbed out next, carrying a thermos as if he were arriving for a weekend retreat. Neither of them looked confused. Neither asked a single question. They looked like new owners arriving to inspect their property. "Eleanor?" I stood in the doorway, half a paint swatch still stuck to my finger. "What's going on?" She flashed me a dazzling smile so artificial it made my teeth hurt. Avery, darling! We simply couldn't wait. Richard and I talked it over and decided it's time we moved in. My brain blinked. Moved in? To my house? To the family's house, she corrected smoothly. We want to be closer to you and Mason as you prepare for the wedding. And really, dear, with all this space, it just makes sense. Behind her, 2 movers began rolling down a ramp. On it sat a grotesque carved mahogany dining table I had only seen once, when Eleanor proudly showed me her heirloom collection. It looked even bigger and more oppressive in the sunlight. I raised my voice. Eleanor, you can't just move into my house. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a patronizing whisper. Avery, sweetheart, you're young. You don't understand how these things work yet. She patted my arm as if comforting a child who didn't know any better. A woman holding the deed alone. It's just temporary. After the wedding, Mason will handle the transfer paperwork. A man should be head of the household. My jaw dropped. Excuse me? Before she could answer, a car pulled up. Mason stepped out, saw the truck, saw my face, and he didn't look surprised. Not even a little. Mason? My voice wavered. Did you know about this? He winced but didn't deny it. Avery, come on, don't make a scene. My parents just want to help. Help? I echoed. They're moving into my house. It's only until everything gets settled, he said, as if explaining something obvious. Just relax. Relax. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not from fear, but from clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply watched. And when the movers carried in Eleanor's floral armchair without asking a single question, I realized this wasn't sudden. This was orchestrated. Later that night, when Mason left his briefcase open on the couch, I saw the corner of a manila envelope sticking out. A photocopy of my deed. My name highlighted in neon yellow, like a problem they intended to correct. I felt my pulse slow, not quicken, slow. The next day, I logged into our shared banking app. A small transfer, then another, then another. Months of small withdrawals from my debit card quietly funneled into a savings account under Mason's name. A secret account, built with my money. A part of me wanted to scream, but the financial manager in me, the woman who had spent her life reading contracts, detecting discrepancies, and solving problems, took over. I didn't storm into the bedroom to confront him. I opened a new secure folder on my laptop and labeled it, Hail Documentation. I took screenshots. I printed bank statements. I recorded calls. I forwarded every email, every suspicious message, every financial transaction to a private address only I could access. Emotionally, I felt myself shutting down. But strategically, I was coming alive. They thought I was naive. They thought they could pressure me, gaslight me, absorb me into their family machine. But they had no idea the woman they were dealing with. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had drawn the battlefield. And I had silently stepped onto it. The next morning, I drove to the house with a small tray of paint samples, determined to reclaim at least one corner of my life. I had convinced myself that maybe I had overreacted, that maybe there was still space for boundaries, if I just enforced them gently. But when I opened the front door, the breath was punched out of me. My living room, was gone. The soft gray couch I'd chosen after 3 weeks of research, replaced with a monstrous, dark leather sectional that smelled like cigar smoke. The minimalist coffee table I saved up for? Gone. In its place stood a heavy, carved wooden trunk that looked like it belonged in a colonial museum. And the walls. God, the walls. My mother's watercolor paintings, delicate blues and golds she painted while recovering from chemo, had been taken down, stuffed somewhere like trash. In their place were oversized portraits of Mason in high school football gear, trophies on shelves I never bought, ribbons hanging where sunlight used to fall. I whispered, "What did they do?" I barely had time to process the violation before I heard footsteps. Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs like she had been waiting for this moment. "Oh, good, you're here," she chirped. We decided the space needed a more established feel, something fitting for the Hale family. The Hale family? My voice cracked. "Eleanor, these are my walls." She walked past me, dropping a pile of folded towels into my arms. "Nonsense, Avery. Once you and Mason marry, everything becomes unified. These aesthetic decisions help set the tone." "The tone for what?" I demanded. "For our home," she said simply. "Now come along, dear." When I tried to open the side door to check the sunroom, the key didn't fit. I tried again and again. Panic flooded my chest. "Why isn't this opening?" I asked. Eleanor turned slowly, pretending to hide her satisfaction. "Oh, right. We changed the locks this morning. Security reasons. Here." She reached into her pocket and dropped a single silver key into my palm. "This one will let you in." Just one key, to my own house. Handed to me like I was a visiting tenant. I stood frozen on the porch, gripping that key so tightly it cut into my skin. She had taken everything, my furniture, my art, my sense of safety, and now she wanted the symbolism too. The message was unmistakable. This is not your home anymore. We decide what belongs here. But the humiliation didn't end at the doorstep. As I walked back to my car, Mrs. Talbot, the neighbor across the street, waved politely. "Oh, you must be the new housekeeper," she said warmly. "The Hales told us they hired someone." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat burned. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being erased. Later that night, sitting alone in my Boston apartment with my laptop humming beside me, I opened the folder where I had stored every document related to the house. Deeds, emails, appraisal reports, everything. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a loophole. Maybe hope. And then I saw it. Buried on page 6 of the original contract, highlighted faintly in yellow by my father before he signed, Clause 18B. This property shall be classified as non-marital and shall remain the sole and irreversible possession of the grantee should the wedding not occur. I read it again, and then a third time because the power of it didn't register all at once. If I called off the wedding, the house was legally mine, permanently, untouchably. Not just a sentimental gift, a fortress written into law. Eleanor's smug smile, Mason's dismissive tone, the stolen money, the changing locks, the humiliation. All of it suddenly snapped into place. They thought they were taking my home. They had no idea I held the one clause capable of burning their entire plan to the ground. I closed the laptop slowly, as if sealing shut the first weapon I had ever owned. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was checkmate waiting for the perfect moment. I did not go back to the Lakeshore house that night. Instead, I drove straight to Portland, checked into a hotel, and called the one person who had seen through Mason long before I did. Harper Quinn, my closest friend, and one of the sharpest attorneys in New England. She arrived with her laptop and a bottle of Cabernet. "You ready to burn it all down?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. Light the match. For 3 hours straight, we combed through every email, every bank transfer, every recorded call. Harper organized them into a clean digital folder with timestamps and legal notes while I watched the mountain of evidence grow. My humiliation was becoming a weapon. "You don't need to fight them emotionally," Harper said. "You fight them procedurally and publicly." The plan was cruelly elegant. Step 1, set a trap. I sent Eleanor an email from a dummy account made to look like a real estate firm, suggesting the deed might have an administrative error and advising her to contact me immediately. Harper predicted, correctly, that Eleanor would explode. She did. She called Mason in a fury. And Mason, panicking, began explaining the entire scheme out loud. How they moved in early to establish presence. How the furniture made it look like a Hale inheritance. How the lock change was meant to force Avery into compliance. Every word was recorded. Step 2, wait for the perfect stage. That stage arrived the next evening at the rehearsal dinner, a beautiful waterfront venue overlooking Casco Bay. White lights strung across cedar beams, wine glasses catching the golden sunset. A setting designed for love, celebration, or a very public execution. When I walked in, conversations dipped. People had clearly heard whispers, but none of them knew the full storm about to break. Eleanor floated around in a navy gown, radiant and smug. Richard looked like the king of a kingdom he didn't own, and Mason, he tried to kiss my cheek. "You look tense," he murmured. "You have no idea," I replied. During appetizers, Eleanor tapped her glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" She placed a hand over her heart with faux humility. "Richard and I are thrilled to share that we have gifted our beloved children the beautiful Lakeshore home, a true Hale family estate." The applause was instant, but something shifted when people noticed I wasn't clapping. I stood slowly. Harper, seated near the back, gave a single nod. "Well," I said, voice carrying across the room, "that's interesting, because my parents bought that house for me. And they made sure it stayed mine. Eleanor stiffened. Avery, dear, let's not do this here. I pulled out a folded document. Clause 18B, I announced, reading it word for word, the same way my father had shown me. This property shall remain the sole and irreversible possession of the grantee should the wedding not occur. A ripple went through the room. Gasps. Whispers. I continued, louder now. Meaning, if I choose not to marry Mason, the house is legally and permanently mine. Not temporary, not shared, not Hale property. Mason's face drained of color. Avery, we can talk about this. Oh, we'll talk, I said. But you should know your voicemails, your transfers, and your mother's instructions are all saved, recorded, time-stamped, backed up. Someone in the corner had their phone out. Recording. Then someone else. Then another. In seconds, the entire room was capturing it. Eleanor lunged toward me. Stop this right now! No, I said calmly. I'm done being quiet. Silence fell so thick it was suffocating. A few seconds later, too late, Eleanor realized the performance was over. People weren't clapping anymore. They were staring at her like she was a stranger who had just walked into the wrong story. By morning, the videos were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, millions of views, comments flooding in. Hashtags forming. Mason the manipulator, the Hale home heist, stand with Avery. Harper called me with an update. Mason's firm initiated an ethics review. Eleanor's charity board demanded a meeting. The town of Lakeshore was buzzing, and none of it was in their favor. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like oxygen return to my lungs. They had tried to rewrite my life story. Now the world was reading theirs. The morning after the rehearsal dinner imploded, I drove back to Lakeshore with a quiet, almost eerie clarity. The house stood exactly where it always had. White shutters, cedar door, the little porch swing rocking in the wind. But for the first time since receiving the keys, I felt like it was truly mine. I opened the door and walked straight into the battlefield they had built. The oversized leather sofa, the hulking dining table, the portraits of Mason staring down from the walls like a warning. I didn't hesitate. Piece by piece, room by room, I dismantled everything the Hales had imposed on me. I boxed Eleanor's floral armchair. I peeled Mason's high school trophies off the shelves. I took down every photograph she had hung to erase my mother's art. When I finished, the house was empty, silent, stripped bare, and finally honest. By noon, the place echoed with openness. It looked less like a home and more like a blank page. And for the first time, that felt right. I wasn't rebuilding yet. I was clearing the stage. At 3 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway. Then another. Eleanor stepped out first, her confidence fractured but still clinging to dignity she no longer owned. Mason followed, avoiding my eyes as if he expected a camera to fly out of the bushes. Avery, Eleanor began, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her coat. We have come to discuss. We're not discussing, I said. Come inside. The living room was so empty that their footsteps sounded too loud. Eleanor looked around sharply, unable to hide the horror. What did you do to our furniture? I opened my laptop and pressed play. Mason's voice filled the room. This is the Hale family home now. Once Avery signs the transfer, it's done. Eleanor's followed, cold and sharp. Don't give her a choice. Push her. She'll fold. Their faces drained. First confusion, then recognition, then fear. Neither spoke. Neither blinked. You recorded us? Mason whispered. No, I answered. You recorded yourselves. You just didn't know who was listening. Eleanor reached for the laptop, but I shut it with a calm finality that made her flinch. I want both of you to leave, I said. Now! Avery, don't be unreasonable, Mason pleaded. You tried to take my home, my money, my autonomy. You underestimated me so completely that you didn't even look for the fireproof lockbox my dad installed in the attic. I stepped closer. This house was never yours, and neither was I. Silence fell like a curtain, and then, without another word, they left. Not triumphantly, not angrily, just small. In the days that followed, my inbox exploded. Not with scandal, but with stories. Hundreds of women wrote to me, then thousands, women controlled, manipulated, financially trapped. Women who felt invisible until someone finally said aloud what had been done to them. Their messages changed something in me. If this house had been a battleground, I wanted its future to be the opposite. I contacted Harper, filed the legal paperwork, and within weeks, the Lakeshore property was transferred, not to my name, but to the Langston Foundation for Women's Autonomy, a financial freedom center, a legal resources hub, a place for women to walk in erased and leave rebuilt. The opening ceremony drew reporters, neighbors, and supporters from all over Maine. Even Eleanor and Mason stood off to the side, unwilling to cause a scene, but unable to pretend they belonged. They stared at the bronze plaque with my name engraved into the building they tried to claim. I stepped up to the microphone. "Some people think winning is about what you keep," I said, "but sometimes the real victory is in what you give away. This home didn't make me whole, but claiming myself did." Applause rose, loud, warm, alive. Later, when the sun began to set, I sat alone on the front steps. The same steps where my father once handed me the key. The same steps where the Hales tried to reduce me to a guest. Now it was a doorway for women who'd been told, "You don't own anything," to finally say, "Yes, I do." I exhaled, slow and steady. They tried to take my house, but I rebuilt my life. And this time, it was unshakable. Before I end this story, tell me, how did it make you feel? If you listened from beginning to end, comment below whether you liked it and what kind of stories you want to hear next. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more women can hear stories like this one.